All right. Shall we get started right on time? What do you guys think?
Um, We'll just leave everything where it is, but we're gonna have to do it in the beginning. Okay.
Okay. So hello everybody. Welcome to the care and feeding of your audio space. My name's Emily Thompson. I work at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and to throw it to my co-presenters.
I'm Jason Evans Groth. I'm currently at my last day at North Carolina State University.
And I'm Ian Malacromi. I'm at Rice University in Houston.
And this is intended to mostly just be we've been doing this for a bit, and this is what we've learned. So we're each going to go over our own spaces and kind of the history thereof. And then mostly this is a place for questions. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. And yeah, we'll go from there. So checking for the next place. So oh, and I meant to please disregard the fact that it says something here, because that was a note and I would think I was supposed to go back and fix it, and I didn't. But basically our thought was that this is about designing for the people you have rather than professional audio producers. We have noticed that listening to colleagues complain and being at various conferences that, wow, we got in somebody from the radio station and they designed all this stuff and now no one can use it. So that's the thing. So Jason and I kind of brainstormed a few personas. So I'm going to get started with, I think the first two are yours, Jason. And then, so tell us a little bit about these people.
So in 2012, when the Hunt Library was being thought of, a couple personas that they were really considering was NC State has a music program, but not a music school. So what about people who are writing songs in their room and don't have access to music school facilities, but or music practice room facilities? How are they going to go and record their things? And what about all these people? NC State actually has a long history of beat making, and where are we gonna supply space for these people on this otherwise STEM campus to do their things? And then I think we share this first year students during their podcast assignment, Emily, don't we?
I think that I think Ian's got it as well. There's just this thing that right now professors are, all of a sudden the students discovered podcasts about 4 years ago and professors have started it. And one of those multimedia assignments that maps really well onto a paper. Because you still have to do the research and you still have to do the citations. They just look a little different. So it's very easy for people to understand without getting into a full-on documentary, but then they do have to record it and they do want it to sound good. And I don't know about you guys, but our professors even have them putting in commercials and other things. And so it's adorable. And then the other one that we have is, for our Greek students have one of their events during Greek week is lip sync. And I don't fully understand it, but I do know that every sound that's supposed to come out of your mouth has to be pre-recorded. So you think of lip sync and it's a bunch of people singing to a song. They have dialogue, and all of the dialogue must be pre-recorded as well. And so we have a lot, I don't understand, but it is a rule. And I've seen the videos and it's pretty cute actually. So I think it works, but they've never been in a recording studio before. And the main thing they're trying to organize is getting their sisters or brothers to actually show up for when they're supposed to record. So they're all kind of stressed, but you get 5 to 10 people crammed in this little room, all trying to record their dialogue for lip sync. And then Ian, you work more with faculty than I think I do.
I bought some bread, but
Yes, we have we certainly have a lot of the podcasting. In fact, we have a couple classes here that are specifically designed around podcasting, so we do get a lot of those sorts of podcasting assignments. But one of the different people or use cases that we have here is professors that are getting interviewed by radio stations or the BBC or something along those lines, and they are being asked to provide high quality audio from their side for their portion of the interview, and that's something that we've been able to sort of support well in our studio here.
So to get into the specific spaces, Jason.
So let's do a quick run through of the history of media labs / audio spaces at NC State. In 2001, we had this moment of debuting the new digital media lab. And as you can see in this picture, all we're really looking at is video and graphic design. And to be fair, as the text said, solidifying the mystical quality of audio production, video and graphic design were privileged, but there were audio spaces back as far back as 2001, mostly like the burgeoning direct microphone setups. A lot of analog conversion stuff was available, not a ton because it was still really hard to do, but and I think most digital labs started as visual things and remain that way. Honestly, I think audio is largely mystical. We can go to the next one. And then so 10 years later, about 2 years before I showed up here, we have this picture. So you can finally see that there's actually audio in it. You can see a MIDI controller at the bottom left of this picture. You can also see that that student is wearing a Greendale shirt that features an image that was a joke on the show community about how administrators don't actually pay attention to imagery on their school flyers. And that what you're looking at here has ended up on some, if you know the joke, then you know what that image is of. But this ended up on so much stuff. But as you can see, it's privileging, green screening, cameras and stuff, but like audio is finally showing up. So next slide, we fast forward to 2 years later. And at this point, the Hunt Library, which is the second main library at NC State, is being debuted. And one of the features of the Hunt Library were 4 rooms called, unfortunately, music rooms. Now I say unfortunately because I mean, as a musician, I think that's great, but like they were named that instead of audio video suites or something like that, they were named music rooms because donors provided the money for them and they really liked music, and they also visually looked like recording studios. So this is the original setup on the picture here. And I make a joke in the text like that we opened the library of the future and it finally featured audio recording prominently, which had at that point been in existence for 156 years. So the human you see here is someone actually interacting with audio. We had 88 key MIDI controllers. But what we also had, and I think it's important to point this out, is you can see a touch screen on top of that MIDI controller. You can also see a really bad mixer in the back with a lot of exposed wires, which we'll all talk about soon. And as a little background, the music rooms were reservable, like study spaces. They were always locked. Patrons used the reservation system to make reservations for them. And then the front desk, which we call our Ask Us desk, would actually walk folks up. These are on the 4th floor. They would walk folks up there. They would check out a binder of information to help the patrons actually get through their time in the music space since it wasn't staffed. And that binder was a token for us to know who was checking out the rooms as well. So we had the room res system. We had a little, essentially like gas station bathroom key to let them in. While they opened, Hunt Library opened in 2013, these debuted in the fall semester 2013-2014. There was a waiting list of at least 50, if not 100 people to use them. And they were absolutely unusable. So, and that's because they were made by AV integrators and IT people and not by anyone who actually used studios. So let's go to the next page. This is why. So the problems with the spaces, as you can see on the right, this is like a table of contents from the documentation we checked out. It took 7 pages to get to the point where you could turn the volume up in the music room. Volume is very important for audio rooms. And so this was a really important thing. I overall wrote 66 pages of documentation to try and explain how to use the spaces. You couldn't multi-track record. The IT and AV integrators wanted to have 2 computers, both PCs and Macs, mostly because somebody on that team liked using FL Studio, which at the time was PC only. So they decided to, in each room, add, for a piece of software that we weren't sure anyone would use, we added a whole other computer with a touch screen that controlled which computer you chose. And this was all because somebody thought it would be a good idea to make this automated. Okay, like the idea with the use case was someone could press a button and a record would be digitized. If you've ever worked in preservation or in an audio studio, you know that's impossible. I don't want to bring up the one button studio debate, but it does not work. So in the fall of 2013, we dealt with it and it was bad. People hated it. The feedback was awful. Let's go to the next slide. in the spring of 2013, a full-time staff member who I now manage, and I literally pulled hundreds of cables and probably thousands of feet of cables from the 4 music rooms at Hunt Library and added the picture here, a PreSonus Fire Studio interface. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is I'm pretty tech agnostic, but what I really wanted was a room that was accessible to people who didn't know what they were doing and also usable for people who did. And these interfaces offered 8 channels of recording. And if you notice in the picture, the only knobs that you see are for input gains and volume. Everything else is kind of hidden inside of the software. And we laser cut these panels to try and give some documentation for what people could use, and also to keep people from unplugging things. And in the spring of 2014, the room started getting used enormously a lot. So let's go to the next slide. Maybe we should just watch a slight bit of this. This video was made by a student once the rooms were usable. So you can see.
Set up a channel for real instrument. Do 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 do. Do do do. La 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 la.
I basically wanted to show this to show just a little bit of what
Hi,
it looked like.
I'm in.
So that was made by not a student worker, but a student who used the space. Like they made more than one video about their time in here. Let's go to the next one. So because of the actually just changing the interface and making it simpler, because of changing the interface and making it simpler, the rooms became usable, easier documentation. This is the original layout of that new space, which is still actually fairly complicated. We were using Mac Minis. We had ridiculously expensive Sennheiser 421s in there that, as you could see, that person didn't know how to use it correctly, but they still were able to record. That's fine. No one was staffing it. Let's go to the next one. In 2015, those rooms were so popular that we ended up making 4 more of them at the other library. So we bought 4, I'm in one right now, 4 vocalbooth.com booths and put them inside of our old lab space. And then we just replicated the setup of what the Hunt music rooms were doing. And they became very popular. We're on main campus here, so there's a few more students. And essentially you can see that setup there. So 2 mics, a keyboard, an interface. Most of everything else happens in software, and there's some digitizing stuff too. I think this is a little too much, honestly, but like it worked really well, and they still work to this day. Let's go to the next thing. Meredith, you just asked a good question. I can actually send you, you asked how much one of the vocal booths costs. I don't remember what we were paying, and I think the prices have gone down. We got the smaller booths with some HVAC stuff with them. I don't really remember the total cost, but it was less expensive than I expected. And I think if you went to their website, you'd find out. So since 2015, and honestly since 2021, we've changed the way it worked. So it used to be unstaffed. Now our spaces are totally staffed. Podcast assignments and music production are the 2 most served needs in the spaces. In 2021, we began staffing all of them full time, keeping rooms on the room system, but providing in-person support at both libraries. We also started only keeping them open when we were staffed, whereas previously we were open 24 hours and people would fend for themselves. We thought that the trade-off of having like a consultation culture would be better. In the last 9 years, there was that should be some technical changes have occurred, including the updated wiring diagram, which you see here. That's currently how all of the music rooms and music booths in the library where I am work. We updated the interface a little bit. We updated computing. We were using Mac Minis. I think we have Mac Studios now. I don't know. Mac Minis were fine and cheap and worked perfect, and updated keyboards. We also dropped Pro Tools. No one used it. Logic and Ableton are the fancy things that people use. Most people use GarageBand and Audacity. We can go to the next thing. So today is my last day here. I'm excited about moving to a position at University of Virginia starting Thursday. And in my last days at NC State, we've talked about what do we do moving forward, and we're going to try to make the rooms even simpler. So we're taking away the giant studio monitors we have and moving into smaller, probably iLoud monitors, which are really, really sound great, but like are a little less loud, because despite these rooms being sound treated, they're not soundproof. We have we're going to move into a newer USB-C interface, but PreSonus interfaces with the limited knobs on the front have been saving graces for us. But honestly, we just want to do the same thing. We want approachable spaces for novice users that are also usable for practitioners, that are supported by students and full-time staff, so that whatever it is they do in here, they could replicate this at home in a fairly low-cost way. We're just giving them a way to have a private space to do it with some support. Stephanie, our rooms are sound treated. In the vocal booths, they come with sound treatment already built. So there's some like carpet on top of press board. At the Hunt Library, the rooms are treated with just like kind of modern audio sound treatment. I can't remember the name of it. They're much louder at Hunt Library because they have glass doors over there that have 1-inch gaps. And that was a design thing. That was us retrofitting what we thought should happen into one of those spaces. But yeah, that's where we are at NC State, and they remain very popular and integrated into classrooms. And I can't wait to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Cool. So over at UTC, University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, I am in the audio suite. We have one. It opened in 2015. This was a brand new building. So this is one of the few purpose-built spaces. It was built to be an audio studio. And so soundproofing wise, we have actual soundproofing in the walls and some of it in the ceiling, but it wasn't enough. So that's why you can see that there's the audio foam on the wall as well, because we still had sound getting out. And it is to the point where we've got this delightful sign, which I'm not sure if that's right way or not, but it does say, reminder, the audio suite is not soundproof, so please be considerate of others in the library and use headphones for loud music. Thanks. We have an ongoing debate about whether or not we should have monitors in here. We took them out for a semester, but they're back in here because enough people asked. But it's basically designed as a bedroom podcasting setup. This is what it looked like originally. You can see the student in there. We did have a record player in here. Nobody used it, so we moved it out. People can still digitize vinyl out on the main studio floor, which is kind of that way through this wall. But they weren't using it in here, so we wanted to gain that real estate back. We started off with a Mac computer, an all-in-one, had the turntables, the monitors, and we would start off with 2 Yeti Pro mics, a Focusrite Sapphire interface. Focusrite, like Jason said, the nice thing about the Focusrites is they don't have a lot of extra knobs on the front. So they do prevent people from doing too much. The Sapphire died right around the time I took over as studio director in 2015. And so we had to get a new one. And then we have, this is our Arturia Keylab 88, which has always been in here. It's been really great so far, the Keylab. We did, I think it was around 2017, so like it's a couple years old. We noticed that some of the keys stopped working. And so one of our previous studio managers, his name was Jonah, we actually had to do the research, and we have learned how to take this sucker apart and clean all of the pads with alcohol, and then put it back together again, and it works fine. I think we've had to do it twice because different keys stopped working. There's like some sort of goo in there. And also, you've met students, they bring snacks. We've had to clean it out. But the fact that we can take it apart and clean it out is really part of our culture here. We like to be able to take stuff. They do produce goo. We'll go into that later, Eric. But we like to be able to take stuff apart and fix it. And we're pretty good with that. So in 2017, we replaced the Sapphire with a Focusrite Scarlett. We are now on our second Scarlett. I really do like the Focusrite Scarlett series. They do a good job. We did in 2024, Michael Standard, who is here, I thought I saw him here, noticed that the Yeti Pros had changed their format. So they used to be an XLR, a standard XLR, and they changed to some other sort of proprietary thing. I don't know if folks are aware, but Blue mics, which used to be one of the great, they made beautiful mics that were really great USB things, the Yeti that everybody used during the pandemic, but they were bought out by Logitech. And I think that really changed what they did, how they were doing things. And so it wasn't a true XLR, but it looked like one. And we kept having problems. And Michael's a little bit more of an expert, so he figured out what was going on. And we have now replaced them with kind of standard Rode condenser mics, which has been working much better. As Jason pointed out, students they're not experts that come in here, and we shouldn't expect them to be. This is a really good example of some documentation that Michael's made just to kind of help them understand gain. And this sits right on top of the interface, which is right there, to just kind of indicate why you need to be loud enough for the mic to pick you up. My favorite story is because students can come and ask for help at the desk, because that is staffed whenever we're open. Had a couple of students come out and they were just like, it's not picking up anything. And I checked everything and everything was actually right. And I said, well, show me what you're doing. And they said, but I'll get to that in just a second, Lisa, sorry. But they were reaching in and they were like, hi, my name's Sally and I'm doing, I'm like, okay, you guys, I know you're trying to be polite, but you have to speak loud enough for the mic to pick you up. And that's all that it was, is they were being really, really quiet. And so this kind of helps them understand how loud they need to be. We have had a couple of times, I don't know what the theater department was doing, but I had to come back and be like, you really can't scream in here. Sorry. But yeah, so that's more of a copyright question, Lisa. I am team with, nobody's told us to not have people digitize their vinyl. We don't have like massive amounts of people coming into the studio to digitize their vinyl. It's kind of the same thing as like the one guy that came in that was doing his whole collection, it was because it was too big and he wanted a smaller version of it. But we don't have a lot of people doing it. The way I see it, it's the same thing as having a copier. Whoever hits the button is because I looked this up and I can't remember the exact statutes, but whoever hits the button is the one doing the infringement, and you are allowed to make copies for your own personal use. So if they're digitizing their own collection for their own use, that's legal. And I'm super into fair use, and yeah, I'm trying to decide whether or not I'll bring my copyright presentation to ACTAL. I need to look at things again. Also, just to give Michael some more props, he did put together a video, if you'd like to watch it rather than us watching it, of how to use the audio suite, which has a QR code on the back of the door. I will say it only has 28 views at this point because the students don't always like to get instructions. However, it only went up in like May. It's been summer, so it's not like there's been a lot of people in here looking for it. But yeah, it's a nice little space. I have seen as many as, I don't know, there was one student who at one point it was like a clown car where it's just like, I swear to God, you've got 30 people in there. How? But they use it quite often. It is reservable only, and you can only reserve it if you are a UTC student, faculty, or staff. We do, Chattanooga being a bit of a music town, we do have students that will occasionally have local collaborators come in, and they are more than welcome. The rule is, though, you have to stay with them. We have had problems with people like checking it out for their friend and then going to class. And I'm sorry, but you have to listen to your boyfriend's terrible rap if you're going to rent out the space. That's just the way. There was one day where I came back and there were like, I think 3 or 4 12 to 14-year-old students. And I was just like, you don't look like UTC students. Oh yeah, our cousin checked it out. And where is your cousin? He said he'd be back in 2 hours. Okay. And we don't want them damaging the equipment and getting charged for it. We are fortunate enough that the public library does have a beautiful recording studio. So if we have people who are locals, we can point them in the direction of the public library where they have, if you think this space is cool, the public library is a professional recording studio with a drum room and Pro Tools and experts and literally Michael Jackson's speakers. So we at least have a lovely space to send them instead. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Sure. So at Rice, the DMC has sort of had a weird history. It first started off as the Electronic Resources Center, which relatively quickly in its history turned into the Digital Media Commons. But we were not designed for dealing with specifically sort of media or content generation from the outset. It was a little more geared towards help with electronic resources, whether that be how do I use this niche piece of software. I believe there was some sort of coding support originally, but weirdly has now morphed into, what we are today, which is really focused around content generation and digital media. The first audio booth we had was when we were the interim period where we were shunted out of the library space into a different building on campus, which was a lovely open, atrium area. There was a lot of natural light. It was fantastic place to work. Horrible place for anything to do with content creation, like glare on the computer screens because there's a skylight above you, and nothing in the way of any sort of sound mitigation whatsoever. And so this, that top photo there is the first audio booth that we had, which is really just a iMac with with a like, small audio interface and a Shure SM58 in a closet. It's nothing to write home about. And while we have sort of iterated and our audio studio has gotten progressively better over time, I will say that like as far as our focus, we have never really had someone who is an audio expert or somebody who has a strong background in audio to sort of guide the direction of that. It's all been sort of piecemeal over time. In 2014, we moved back into the library down into the basement, which is better in some respects and worse in others. And in the process, they sort of built out the space a little bit for our uses. And so now we have a much larger audio studio, and we wanted it to be something that people could come in and use for full-on interviews with multiple people and have multi-track recording. And so we originally had it set up with an Apogee Duet and 2 Shure SM58 microphones, which worked well enough. But then there was a decision that, well, we have two channels, why not 4? And so in 2019, we moved to an Audient ID44 audio interface with 4 SM58s. And then in 2022, we sort of iterated on that a little bit further, getting a little bit nicer mics, the SM7Bs being sort of, at this point, the industry standard podcasting mic that you are likely to see most content creators using. And as far as the space itself is concerned, it works relatively well for that specific intended purpose. Spoken word, it's reasonably well set up to handle that. Notably, you'll see that we don't have any sort of keyboard or MIDI pad or anything like that. I believe we have a USB keyboard, which is really old. Some of our Rice Shepherd School of Music is, a fairly large music school that is attached to Rice. We have had some composition majors come in and use that, not for playing, but really just for like laying down their compositions in their own specific programs that they're using. But actually, in that case, they're usually not even using the audio studio; they're just plugging in it to their own computer. We haven't had a lot of focus on music creation here. And again, that comes down to, my background is in photography and film. I am now sort of in charge of leading the direction of the audio studio, and I certainly would not consider myself a audio engineer or music producer or anything of the sort. But we try and keep it. We try and keep the possibilities open. That was one of the main reasons why the decision early on was that we were not going to go with the one button solution. We did not want to do the one button studio for that reason. And of course, one of the downsides of this is that, the Audient ID44, while a fantastic interface, has a lot of buttons and a lot of dials that people can touch. And it is a constant struggle to sort of keep it set up in a, sit down, ready to go state. Basically barring, going in and making sure that everything is fully reset in between patrons. There's not a whole lot we can do, and it's very quick and easy for somebody to unplug something or flip a switch that they're not supposed to. turn off things. That's a really common one. So that is certainly one of the bigger struggles that we have. There is a poster on the wall by that computer monitor you see there, that has a lot of the very common troubleshooting issues that people have. And of course, nobody reads it, which, it's fine. It's there. We do have staff on hand that they can come ask questions. But of course, the problem being not many people we have on staff have a whole lot of experience with audio, with anything in the audio world. And so, at best, we're sort of one step ahead in terms of troubleshooting, on average, especially if I'm not around. So yes, I'm looking at the chat. Yes, for the SM7Bs, they are dynamic mics, which means that they do have very low gain, which is why when we bought those in 2022, we also bought a Cloudlifter CL4 preamp to add into the mix, and I mean that has helped us out substantially with gain issues in general. One thing that I will point out, though, is that looking at that lovely room, you see that it has, while that may look like acoustic paneling, it's really kind of more like a fabric covered pin board, which is not all that helpful for mitigating sound. The walls are thin. There is no insulation. You can hear through the walls clear as day. And so sound mitigation and soundproofing has really been the biggest issue that we've been dealing with. Because we're set up mostly for because we're mostly set up for these sorts of podcasting, spoken word types of situations, it usually isn't a huge issue in terms of sound bleeding out. Every once in a while, we'll get an a cappella group coming in and belting, and that comes through. We get a couple SoundCloud rappers. That's always fun. But we do have a lot of issues with sound bleeding into the studio. To give some context, that back wall is the back wall of that studio is like an exterior wall, but we're in a basement, so that's fine. But on either side, on one side is that shares a wall with my boss's office, and then on the other side on the other side, it shares a wall with the photo and video studio, which people will use for things like video interviews. And we have run into some really annoying issues recently where if both studio spaces are being used simultaneously for recordings, you will have sound bleed through and get picked up on the mics in one studio or the other. For the longest time, the saving grace that we had was that even the SM58s don't have a whole lot of have like fairly low input volume, which allowed us to avoid the sound bleeding through being picked up by the mics. I do not think that is a fantastic solution, but it is something to note. If you're using dynamic mics, you can sort of mitigate some of those issues by just virtue of the fact that it's not going to pick it up all that well. And so if we go to the next slide. So this is where we are at now. We have I submitted a proposal about 2 years ago to improve our studios by unfortunately just ripping them out and building them again, because the problems that we have with regards to sound mitigation are not things that we can just solve by adding stuff to the walls existing. We need to rebuild them structurally. And so what we are looking to do is we're looking to move to a double stud design where, we have 2 rows of studs with an air gap between them, and, insulating material, as well as like double 2 layers of drywall on either side of the wall. Mass is really the main thing that's going to be helping you in terms of preventing sound from transmitting through the walls. Also buying some STC rated doors, which are expensive and take a long time to show up. So we shall see whenever those, whenever those show up, hopefully sooner rather than later. But this is perhaps a cautionary tale. If your university is looking to expand in this direction, to put in or to have an audio recording space, if you have the opportunity to have some say in the design plans, do so before it's actually built, because it's a lot more expensive once the walls are already up and you have to tear them down and rebuild them. But ultimately, I think it's something that you know, it's something that we really needed to do. Um, just because we basically can't have people simultaneously using our two studio spaces, which to me seems like an untenable circumstance, right? Like ideally I would want everything to be used to be able to be used simultaneously. Um, and yeah, seeing what's going on in the chat, yeah, you'll notice that there were no monitors in our studio, and that's partially because of how bad the sound transmission through the walls is. So we have like a four-way headphone splitter, and so everyone's listening to listening via headphones in our studios. It's again not ideal, and you know, we can perhaps once we improve the actual structure, we may look at putting in monitors. Hopefully that is something that we can do without causing distractions in the other spaces as well. But and of course, you know, as I'm sure you all get to deal with, there's perennial talks about building a whole new library. So maybe we'll get a whole brand new amazing space at some point. But you know, that could be 10, 20, 30, many years down the line. So but yeah, that's all I have for Rice.
Right. So the next couple slides, we've got one that's just general tips, things that we probably mentioned already. And then our next slide will be the cautionary tales and the things that are going to happen, whether you want them to or not. So basically, we've noticed here, so we are pretty well soundproofed here in our purpose-built space, but people don't always understand that like there's a physics element with bass where the vibrations still escape. We did have a student that like complained that he couldn't listen to his music at obscenely loud levels because we kept telling him to turn it down. And mostly what we were hearing was the vibrations. And he kept telling us that professional audio studios are completely soundproof. And I'm like, yes, but that's why no one wants to live next to them, because there's still vibrations. So they don't understand it. We've gone into this enough. There's no such thing as a one button solution. There's another session going on right now talking about that. It's just both with audio and video, trying to have it just like one button and go isn't really a thing. And the more you try to do it, the more it kind of gets harder. So yeah, as Jason mentioned, and as we've all mentioned, having the simpler interface is better. I can actually show you the Focusrite if you'd like. Maybe, I don't know how webcams work. So you can see it right there where we've just got like just some very basic knobs. I think that we've all discovered, that was a mistake. Okay. I think we've all discovered that like the more complicated it is, the more buttons people will push. I really like the Scarlett, but it does have buttons that will let you turn off the mics. That's the most common question is the mics aren't working. Okay, you need to hit this button every time. So program-wise, I was talking about this in the wildcard as well. Like my personal favorite, just as Jason said, I like Audacity. I think GarageBand is a little bit better for music because it will actually do some MIDI control, whereas Audacity, not so much. Our fancy programs are Logic, Ableton, and Audition. Audition comes with the Adobe Suite. Logic is kind of grown up GarageBand. That's why we like it. And Ableton, we will be getting rid of when our license is up because nobody's using it. What do you two think? What are your favorite interfaces or basic DAWs?
I mean, at Rice, we only support GarageBand and Audacity currently. Again, we're not doing a whole lot of music production here, and so every once in a while, somebody will ask if we have, you know, a Logic license or something of the sort. But the demand is pretty low. Perhaps when our studio is a little bit better set up to allow people to record instruments, you know, we may look into that, but as of right now, GarageBand and Audacity are perfectly fine for everything that people are doing.
So for the most part, for assignments, we push GarageBand. When people come in on their own, they're using Logic and Ableton.
Yeah, and Ableton is cool. It's just hard. It's really, really hard.
Well, I would say Ableton's hard if you didn't start with Ableton, but there's a whole generation of people that did. And so like there's a Logic Ableton divide, and that's whether you want like a standard timeline or the Ableton thing. And it does have a lot of knobs. But for the people who like it, those have turned out to be the practitioners that were in that persona group that we thought might be here, and it turns out they were. Because
Yeah.
Ableton's expensive. Logic isn't as much. Um, but yeah, GarageBand and Audacity are what we see mostly.
Yeah. And like if we get a bunch of people asking for Ableton, we'll get it back, but it's usually just it's 1 or 2 people a semester. We're a smaller university, so I think we're at what 1,200-1,400 FTEs, so we just don't have as big of an audience. So when you're doing your connectors, like we discovered this with the Yeti Pros, that's something that's not quite an XLR and not quite a USB, and it doesn't like the interface in a really interesting way. XLRs are just a little bit, it's a better connection for audio, although you'll find that most of your MIDI stuff is going to come in via USB, just because that's the nature of the MIDI. Oops, go back. Prefabrication nah, I'm gonna let Jason talk about this one because I don't have a prefab stuff, but they're great, right?
They were exactly what we needed. So we were in 2 spaces that weren't built to be these spaces, and when we decided to make audio specific spaces, the prefabs were great. So they you still have to add them, you still have to put them in a room, but you don't have to build the whole room. Like and that was super helpful. These we have tested, and these are the quietest rooms on this campus, and they're not even the highest graded quiet rooms that we could have bought. So they work really well.
And also to keep your explanation simple, and I'm going to go move on to the pitfalls. As Ian said, it's a lot harder to put soundproofing in later, but you can make a space work. You can make there's so many ways that you can make a space work. Something we've noticed in particular at the UTC Library Studio, although we did have a 4-year break, or like a 2 or 3 year break during the pandemic, but the space needs to both be private but also well trafficked. We've had some vaping in here. Usually, I don't know if we've ever had anyone outright smoking pot, but they were definitely vaping it because we could smell it. I don't think they could. But just so you know, I find that the best way to deal with that, so you're not alienating students, is you just point out that like your audio foam is fabric and absorbs odors, and they will usually be embarrassed and stop. Because they do actually care about the space. They just honestly thought you wouldn't notice. Patrons will unplug and rearrange things. They're gonna play. I often think that the most dangerous patron is the one who's watched like 2 YouTube videos and thinks they're really good. They're gonna just rearrange everything. So you'll need to know, and they won't tell you that they did it. And so the next person comes in and then you'll have to go in and fix it. People don't really read materials, or they'll figure it out. So it's a good idea to just have people around. And it's the nice thing about audio is you can do your best with what you've got. You can have like a mic, a little bit, a quiet room in Audacity, and you still have great things. So yeah, we did want to leave lots of room for questions. So we've got about 7 minutes before we've got to turn it over to the next session. But are there any questions? Thank you all very much for coming. You can either say them or put them in the chat. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you very much for coming.
As we wait for questions, there's something I meant to say during my presentation. I'm going to die on the hill that audio production is the foundation of most good media production, and it just isn't taken very seriously. So if you dedicate any space and any thought to making it both easy and good, you will be doing more than most people do. So it doesn't have to be perfect to be a setup, but it should be isolated. There should be some dedication to it. And it can be, you don't have to be, it is, I think, intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. There are certain principles that can be followed. And I think, honestly, I think that's where I would start, honestly, Lisa. It's like just knowing that as long as we're doing it, it's working.
When I teach my classes, I tell them that like bad video, you can put a weird filter over it and call it an artistic choice. Whereas bad audio, it takes longer to fix it and it will still sound bad. The studio has a list of tutorial videos, which Josh, no, they don't necessarily require them, but sometimes we watch them in class. We try and keep everything under 2 minutes. But the one on how to check out equipment has terrible audio. Well, I mean, it's not terrible. I spent hours getting it to, well, it's not that bad. But I keep it that way and I use it as an example when I'm teaching video stuff to be like, what's wrong with that? So they can say it doesn't sound great. And I can explain that I didn't know the camera, I didn't check my mics, and I spent solid 6 hours trying to fix it because I couldn't re-record. So watch your sound. So yeah.
And one thing, I mean, I feel like I've harped on it enough, Lisa, but if there's one thing with a clean slate, the very first thing would be to actually have a somewhat purpose-built space for it. I mean, it's not, as we said, it's not a requirement, but it certainly does help quite a bit if you're able to have a purpose-built space that actually that actually is sort of set up for what you're trying to do from the get-go.
Yeah. The thing I would ask for is another one.
Having multiple would be fantastic. That's something that we've run into here where especially when we have these big classes doing podcasts, we have one studio and they can check it out for up to 4 hours at a time, and there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, we have a lot of comm students who just like they need to talk into their phone real quick for 15 minutes, and so they want to be in the audio suite, and then they end up in the video suite, and they struggle with the concept of reserved space. But if someone's already in there, then they get frustrated, and because they literally just need it for 10 minutes, but there's someone in there, and I would love to have a second one. Pre-pandemic, we had people waiting for people to miss their reservations, because if you're 15 minutes late, you lose your reservation. And yeah, we had people waiting, and it hasn't quite picked back up to the same extent, but it is moving in that direction. And there's a study room right through there that I want, but we never take away study rooms. So we'll see.
Video essays happen frequently here, Lisa. And I was just going to say, like, if I can answer both of the questions you just put in there, which are great. If I was starting over again, I would also remind everyone who is building it that there's no way that you can buy your way out of having to set levels or edit if you're actually, I talk faculty out of doing media presentations or like podcasts all the time because there's no reason to have it if it's going to suck. Like if you're just recording your book report, you might as well just write that. So when it comes to video essays, I think that's a really cool assignment because I think maybe one of the most important things I've learned doing the digital media thing is prep, which I learned when I was doing media production as a kid and in college, and no one really wants to do. But like if someone comes prepped to the studio, the technology takes a back seat to the content that they're actually creating, and it's easier to get something good. And then if you're doing that with video essays, you're essentially writing a podcast and then illustrating the podcast with video, which is really awesome. And so they use these spaces for that also. And I think that faculty members have found that that's a good way for them to engage with media creation without it being something where they have to see their face on camera. And is really focused on audio, to be honest. Like the audio is the most important part of a video essay. There's no two ways about it, in my opinion. But I'm not going to watch a video essay that I can't hear. So.
Yeah, and we do have rubrics that we share with faculty to help them understand how to grade it. But we're really lucky because we have a very robust instruction program, and we have one of our computer classrooms has all of the software that we use that can be used on a Windows computer. So no GarageBand, but we do have Audacity. And we will teach us a library session where we go through and be like, this is how you set up Audacity. This is how you check the gain. This is how you plug in the microphone. This is how you do the edits. This is the difference between pause and stop. And go through all of that and then know that they can come in and make an appointment later. But we are also one of the very few places where we have 6 people on staff, 3 full-time tenure track faculty librarians and 3 full-time staff, which just opens up a lot more complicated instruction. We're really, really lucky.
I just found out on my last day at NC State that something I've been dreaming about happening, which is getting rid of our tool-based workshops and changing them over to workshops like, here's how you capture audio. which so you don't even have to think about software, but how do I speak into a mic appropriately? How do I set levels? Like that is the stuff that nobody thinks about talking about, which makes any setup work. I'm throwing into the chat this video that we made during COVID to help people record things at home that my colleague Kyle made, which I think is really great in that regard too.
Yep. So maybe time for one more question if anybody has it. Of course, all three of us are more than happy to be contacted separately. Just note that Jason has several different emails, and the NC State one, not after today.
Just use that personal one that I threw in there. I can't wait to see you amongst all the offers to buy my house.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you all very much for coming, and we're going to let you all go to the next session, and we'll probably see you around at various virtual things, unless you're Jason and driving to a different town. But hope to see you all at the real one, and if I owe you a Discord link, I will try and get to that as soon as I can. Have a good day.
There's something so sad about that sound of